So for myself, I never see it as I'm replacing Carlos Correa. I'm Jeremy Pena. Carlos Correa is a great ball player. He's done great things in Houston, but I'm Jeremy Pena. I want to play my game. I don't need to fill anyone else's shoes.
That was your new Astros shortstop, Jeremy Pena, as spring training wraps up and opening day is just days away. Good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to the Fox 26 Sportstream. As always, I'm Sal Manine, sports producer here at Fox 26. We're going to get into everything Astros and Major League Baseball, as opening day is just around the corner again. Thursday night, the Astros will open things up on the West Coast when they take on the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. They change the name every other year, but that's what they are, the LA Angels of Anaheim, as the Astros played their final exhibition in Florida this afternoon, a 3-3 tie with the Mets. The only real takeaways from there, Jeremy Pena got another RBI, Jose Urquidy looked sharp, and so the Astros will get ready for 2022 and to defend their American League pennant. We'll also delve a little bit into some news going on with UH football and the Rockets, as the regular season is finally coming to a close in the NBA for the second year in a row. The Rockets will not be part of any type of postseason, so perhaps we'll touch on them a bit as things roll along. But we got to start with the Astros, who are not just the defending American League champs, but still one of the favorites to win the AL again. Much like we heard a year ago, where there wasn't that one dominant team in the American League that you said it's going to take a whole heck of a lot to try to beat those guys and make it to the World Series. That's, at least as here we are the first week of April, how things stack up now. There's probably 7 or 8 teams who all look at themselves as having a legitimate shot at winning the American League pennant. Of course, the Astros are at the very top, if not the second team on that list. I think they and the White Sox probably right now is who you would put as the favorites, but certainly the rest of the American League East, other than the Baltimore Orioles, all have a claim to make. Everybody in the AL West, save for Oakland, went in big with trying to make their teams better. And then, oh, by the way, if everything breaks correctly for Carlos Correa's new team, then maybe you are talking about the Minnesota Twins even making a run to October. So we'll get into all that as things roll along. But let's start with the Astros, and kind of right now, as we're just a couple days away from the opener, what looks to be the big keys to Houston having continued success in the American League, and not just winning the division, but getting into October and playing deep into October. And it starts with the rotation, and the two names at the top of that rotation, and Justin Verlander and Lance McCullers Jr. Obviously, Verlander missed all of 2021, basically missed all of 2020. Remember, he only pitched the very first game of the year and then started to feel bad afterwards, and then ultimately had to have Tommy John surgery at the end of 2020. So really one major league game for the future Hall of Famer since the 2019 World Series. But so far, JV has looked and felt good in spring training. And then we all know Lance McCullers Jr., what happened to him dealing with injury in the playoffs last year. We know he's not going to be ready for opening day. So in the case of those two all-stars and the two guys who are the anchors of your rotation, it's all right, they're getting healthy, but how does that health sustain throughout the grind that is a 162-game season? And then if you're Houston, likely another month of postseason baseball. So Justin Verlander was finally tagged for an earned run yesterday in his last start of the spring. He said that he feels good health-wise. It was just a matter of the timing wasn't quite there, and that's what he wants to work on. But he's grateful to be feeling good and to be healthy, and he likes where his stuff's at as long as he can figure out the timing. And then you got Lance McCullers Jr., and just how much longer does he need to rehab? How long does it take him to work into his true all-star form? And then what does the rotation look like come late September and into October? If JV and Lance McCullers Jr. are both healthy, that's as good, if not the best 1-2 punch possibly in the American League. And so that's certainly question number one for the Stros. Since I brought up JV and his start yesterday, let's hear from him himself what he had to say after that outing in which he struck out 5, but he did give up 2 earned runs on 6 hits and 5 innings of work in yesterday's exhibition. Here's Justin Verlander.
Yeah, it's I'm happy to get through it healthy, but still some stuff to work on. So, I'm kind of looking at it 2 different ways. Definitely pleased with the health part, though. Now is the time that hopefully my body is used to the 5-man rotation, the 5 or 6 day routine, and just try to make it as normal as possible.
So again, the big thing for Justin Verlander is he feels good. The velocity is back and all that. So if there's any worry whatsoever, if you're a Houston fan, it's simply, can he hold up over the course of 162 games and then some? And if there was any pitcher in baseball that you would bet on coming off of Tommy John surgery, it's a guy like Justin Verlander, who again is a future Hall of Famer. So getting back to the keys to the 2022 Astros season, the big story otherwise, on the offensive side of things, is obviously the man who we heard from at the top of the show, and that is the man who has to succeed Carlos Correa, Jeremy Pena, taking over as the everyday shortstop. And he's had as good a spring as you can ask for any infielder, let alone a rookie who has to try to take over for one of the most popular players in franchise history and arguably the best player at his position in Carlos Correa. But Jeremy Pena, as I mentioned, got another RBI today, hitting over 300 in the spring. We know that the glove is there. The glove has been there for some time. Even going back to last year, we were hearing things about Jeremy Pena, top prospect for the Stros, already has a major league glove. It's how much can the bat catch up and how quickly can he adapt to big league pitching and then adjust a second time once big league pitching starts to see more and more of him. But he's got a good head on his shoulders. He says all the right things, as we heard just a moment ago, and he certainly has caught the eye of his skipper, Dusty Baker, who obviously knows a thing or two about grooming young talent. Here's what Dusty Baker had to say down in Florida about is Jeremy Pena as good as advertised from what he's seen from his young shortstop.
I don't read advertisements, really. Like I let my eyes tell me. And, the young man's playing good. He's playing good. He just came out of winter ball. So, he's probably further ahead than some of the guys that are here. But
all right, we're having some internet issues there with Dusty Baker, but you heard he doesn't buy into the hype. He just goes by what he sees, and what he sees is that Jeremy Pena is a very, very talented young infielder. Hit 2 home runs yesterday, his first 2 homers of the spring, and so there's no reason to think that this cannot work again. Obviously, he's not going to jump in and from day one be Carlos Correa, and that's not what he's trying to be. Again, Carlos Correa is quite possibly the best shortstop in baseball right now, and certainly when he is healthy. But for a kid in his early 20s who has not had a taste of big league action yet thus far in the spring, Jeremy Pena has answered all the questions. Let's hear from him a little bit more on his approach to this year and being a part of an Astros team that is not just the defending champs, but is hoping to repeat their success in winning the American League pennant again this year. Here's Jeremy Pena.
Dusty's been great to me. He's taken me in since the first day. He's encouraged me to be the best player that I can be. And I would love to get the opportunity. I feel ready, and whatever happens, happens. Well, this team already has a winning culture, and we just want to build off that. I know everyone here knows what the goal is to win this championship, to win the World Series, and we're all going to try to do our best to make that happen.
And Jeremy Pena received from some high praise from Mr. October, Reggie Jackson, who, remember, is down there at camp, is part of the special advisor to owner Jim Crane. And he said that he reminds him of a young Robinson Cano, who obviously Reggie worked with when his time with the Yankees when Cano was coming up, another Dominican infielder. But he said, Reggie Jackson said that Jeremy Pena is saying all the right things, has the right approach, has the right work ethic, and somebody who, much like Dusty Baker, knows a thing or two about baseball and about seeing young prospects come up. He had nothing but positive things to say about Jeremy Pena. And so if that is a question that can be answered, again, you're not going to replace a Carlos Correa, but if you can get enough that you're not worried about shortstop being a liability, then again, the Astros are in a very good position. And you have to think that that was part of the calculus as to why they didn't make that 10-year offer to Carlos Correa in free agency that he was seeking, that the Stros, as far as we know, were only willing to go 5-6 years because they know they have Jeremy Pena there at short. And while he's not Carlos Correa, he's still very serviceable. So while they couldn't make it work with the contract for Correa, the Stros are feeling good about what their young shortstop can do in trying to fill a hole in this lineup. And that kind of brings us to the next few points on our keys to 2022 for the Astros. We know that when that World Series against Atlanta ended in November, that the big questions were what's going to happen at short and what's going to happen in center field. And the Stros were able to make it work in the first year without George Springer last year by getting enough from the likes of Chas McCormick and Jake Myers and Jose Siri, who had a terrific postseason. And so now as you approach 2022, we still don't know is if Chas McCormick, who is likely going to be the starter Thursday night opening day, is he going to be the everyday guy once Jake Myers returns from injury? Remember, he had that shoulder injury where he crashed hard into the wall in that first round series against the Chicago White Sox. Is that enough between a healthy Jake Myers, Chas McCormick, and Jose Siri? Do the Stros possibly look on the trade market? Do they bring up one of their prospects? Obviously, Pedro Leon is a highly touted prospect who will be beginning the year in the minors. Or are the Stros able to piece enough together that, yes, you're not going to get George Springer out there, but can you at least get enough that you don't have a glaring hole in your lineup? And kind of going in tandem with that and with looking at what is Jeremy Pena going to bring to the table every day on the offensive side of things, is look at the bottom of your screen. If Alex Bregman is finally healthy, and we know that the last 2 years he's missed a lot of time and has not been the same Alex Bregman when he's out there. He says he feels as good as he has since 2019. If he's back to the Alex Bregman everybody knows, then that was a guy who finished in the top 5 in MVP voting in back-to-back seasons in 2018 and 2019. And so it starts to mitigate some of the holes that you may have in your lineup where you're going, all right, you don't have the bat of a Carlos Correa or a George Springer, but if you're having the bat of the Alex Bregman, who everybody knows and is a superstar and one of the 10, 20 best players in the league, if not top 5 MVP candidate when healthy, if that guy's back, well, then you still have possibly the best lineup in the American League when you pair him with a Jose Altuve, with a Yuli Gurriel, who won the batting title and has had a tremendous spring, with a Michael Brantley, professional hitter, Yordan Alvarez, who is healthy, fully recovered from his knee ailments of a few years ago, Kyle Tucker, who continued to build on his entrance into the big leagues and just keeps looking to break out year in and year out and do better and better than the season before. If you have all that, that's why you can sustain the loss of a guy like Carlos Correa to an extent. Obviously, every team in baseball would rather have Correa on their team than not, but if Alex Bregman is healthy and feeling good and holds up over the course of 162 games, then there's no reason that this Astros lineup shouldn't be at the top or at the very near top in terms of runs scored, production, run differential in the American League. So just to round things out here as we kind of put a bow on the keys to 2022 going into the regular season, the only other question is really, what does the back end of the starting rotation look like? I actually think that the bullpen, unlike the last couple of years, you don't have as many question marks. Ryan Pressly, all-star closer, one of the guys on the short list of who in the American League do you want locking down the ninth inning? You got Ryan Pressly. And James Click, general manager, did a great job at last year's trade deadline of addressing concerns in the bullpen. Obviously, every team is always looking for extra arms, and so we'll keep an eye on that as things roll along. But with the likes of Phil Maton, if you finally have a healthy Pedro Baez, Rafael Montero, who, remember, came over at the deadline last year but was hurt and so wasn't a part of the postseason, but Ryan Stanek had a good 2021. So the bullpen doesn't have as many question marks for the Stros as it did the last couple years. But behind Justin Verlander and Lance McCullers Jr. and Framber Valdez, who you feel good about, you know what you're getting with him, what does the fourth and fifth spot in the rotation look like? Obviously, Luis Garcia, tremendous the last two seasons in the postseason, especially after getting off to that really rocky start against Boston at the beginning of the ALCS, and then just absolutely slammed the door in his second go round against Boston, and worked on some things with Brent Strom and was a completely different pitcher. If he's able to adjust to taking on a bigger workload and approaching possibly 200 innings pitched, then what does it look like behind the big names that you know at the top? Jake Odorizzi had his ups and downs in his first year as an Astro, but once they adjusted to only let him go two times through the rotation, they were able to find something that worked a little bit better. But there's obviously still question marks. And then Jose Urquidy, who I mentioned looked sharp today, was hampered by injuries a year ago. There's plenty of options for who's going to fill that fourth and fifth spot for Houston. It's just a matter of, do they pitch up to their potential and up to what we know they have, or do we start to see some of those inconsistencies? And then, of course, you always have to keep in mind the role that injuries play, especially when you consider you're coming off an abbreviated spring training that guys didn't really have as long to ramp up in terms of pitchers, ramp up to feeling their regular selves and being able to give you the length that they're used to. So what does it look like behind Justin Verlander at the top of the rotation? And if something happens where down the road you do have to maybe stagger a few more off days to get a JV or a Lance McCullers or maybe even one of those other pitchers, what does it look like as you try to piece together your best five arms? We should also point out that Christian Javier, who will be starting the regular season in the bullpen and will be assuming the long relief role, he's somebody who James Click and Dusty Baker have been adamant they project as a starter. And so he's a guy who, if it all starts to come together, does he possibly earn a spot in the rotation by the time October rolls around? So will certainly be interesting. Will certainly not lack for drama. As I mentioned, there's probably 7 or 8 teams right now in the American League that if you told me they are the ones who ended up winning the American League, I wouldn't be shocked. Obviously, I think Houston and the White Sox are better than some of those teams. I would still put them ahead of teams like the Yankees, the Mariners, even the Blue Jays, who on paper have a stacked team. Now it's just a matter of, all right, go out and show it. But there's going to be little room for error in the American League. And we've talked before about even just within the division that everybody other than Oakland got a lot better. And you think about a team like the Angels, who the Stros will open up with in this first series this weekend. they have arguably the two best players in all of baseball in Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. And if Mike Trout's healthy, if Houston's own Anthony Rendon is healthy, and then if they're able to get something out of all those pitchers that they went out and added, Noah Syndergaard, another local guy from Houston, Ryan Tepera in the bullpen, is this the year that the Halos finally start to show something and start to give some type of pitching help to their stacked lineup? Obviously, Seattle had Houston kind of on their heels up until the last week and a half of the regular season in 2021. Was that just a flash in the pan, or was that what a lot of people in baseball think, that Seattle was laying the foundation and they're a team who's going to win 90-plus games for the foreseeable future since they have so much young talent that they're bringing up? They also announced today that they're bringing up Julio Rodriguez, their number one prospect, who, according to the various different baseball prospectus, ESPN, all of them have him as rated as one of the 3, 4, 5, or 6 best prospects in all of baseball. And so he looks like he's going to be their starting center fielder on opening day. And then, of course, everybody knows what the Rangers did. Spending big, they're going to have a lineup. They always are able to hit the ball up there in Arlington, but do they have the pitching to match? So one of the many things that we will be watching as baseball that counts is actually here again, Thursday night, 8:30 Houston time, when the Astros open up in Anaheim against the Los Angeles Angels. All right, before we get out of here, I did want to mention quickly some news on the UH football front. Of course, spring football wrapping up. They'll play their big open practice. They don't call it a spring game. It's an open practice that folks can go to Friday night at TDECU Stadium, but there will be no Alton McCaskill, the Oak Ridge product who had a breakout freshman year as the feature running back, tore his ACL in practice over the weekend, undergoing surgery. No timetable as to how long he'll be out. Again, there was a time not that long ago, torn ACL automatically meant a year plus you were out. Obviously, we've seen guys come back a lot sooner, but you're obviously not going to see Alton McCaskill at the very beginning of the 2022 campaign, if at all. But UH did pick up a big transfer in the portal market, a highly touted recruit and another guy with local ties from the Houston area. We will have that story for you tonight on Fox 26 News at 9. We'll also check in with the Rockets. So I mentioned we'll play the final week of basketball for the 2022 campaign this week. They're in Brooklyn tomorrow. I almost wanted to say New Jersey. They're at the Nets tomorrow. Then they travel to Toronto to take on the Raptors. And then Sunday afternoon, we'll wrap up the season at home against the Atlanta Hawks. But we'll check in with the Rockets as they get set to wrap things up and are already kind of turning their attention to the offseason and what will be a big offseason, not just with the draft, but how well these young players continue to develop. We should point out Jalen Green, 4th straight 30-point game last night. Last time a rookie had 4 straight 30-point games, Allen Iverson and Michael Jordan. So pretty good company that Jalen Green finds himself right now. But before we get out of here, we do want to give a huge tip of the cap and standing ovation to one of the best to ever do it in the Houston sports scene, and that is a longtime Houston Chronicle football writer, John McClain, a Hall of Famer and one of the truly nice guys in this business, hanging it up after nearly 50 years, of doing this professionally. Our sports director, Mark Berman, was able to chat with John McClain as he's calling it a career and one that certainly everybody in the industry owes a big thank you and tip of the cap to for what he was able to bring us. I mean, if you're from Houston, you grew up reading him every single day in the Chronicle, and even as he got to the end of his career, never slowed down, still just as good. And so we're going to miss seeing him in the Chronicle on a day in, day out basis. But here's Fox 26 sports director Mark Berman with the Hall of Famer, the General John McClain.
John, this is your 47th year at the Chronicle. Why have you chosen to retire now?
Mark, I turned 70 in November. As you know, it's actually my 51st year in the business, counting working at the Waco Tribune-Herald. And I just thought it was a good time to go. And the Chronicle's treated me like royalty. So is Fox, so is the Sports Radio 610. And I made so many friends along the way, including you. And I'll say right off the bat, you're one of my closest friends, and you have been for over 40 years. And thank you for having me.
A pleasure, John. You covered many of the biggest stories in the history of this town, broken many of them. What do you look back on as your favorite memories?
I'll tell you the worst memory. January 3rd, 1993, you and I are walking down the tunnel at what was Ralph Wilson Stadium in Orchard Park, New York. And the din was so loud we could see each other's lips move, but we couldn't hear each other when the Oilers choked the biggest game in NFL history, blew that 35-3 lead. That's the game that I will always remember most. I talked to Bruce Matthews recently. He said, when it's on, I always watch it because I think, at the end, it just might be different.
Well, I don't call that one of my favorite memories. But anyway, John, if you could speak to all the many thousands of people who've read you, listened to you, followed you for all these years, what would you like to tell them?
I would tell them thank you. Thank you for being supportive. I've made a lot of friends through the decades. Had a lot of people disagree with me, email me, and I'm glad, because if you didn't have disagreements, it would be so boring. And I want to thank my family, my friends, my followers on Twitter. They've done great by me. And I want to thank all my bosses, and plus all the people I've covered, people with the Oilers and Texans. I have been given a gift of employment for almost 47 years by the Chronicle. Not many people can say they've stayed almost 47 years with one employer.
I'm going to miss you, John. Best of luck, buddy.
I'll miss you too. Can't wait to have lunch with you, and you'll be buying.
Shout out to the General, the Hall of Famer, if ever there was one. That's going to do it for this installment of the Fox 26 Sports Stream. Again, we'll have much more on the Astros tonight on Fox 26 News at 9, update on the Rockets, plus a big pickup for football. And as always, for all the up-to-the-minute scores, news, updates, anything you want to know in the Houston sports scene, make sure you are following our sports director, Mark Berman. You can find him on Twitter. His handle is @MarkBerman, Fox 26. For all of us here at Fox 26, I'm Sal Manine. We'll see you next week. Take care.